So, when I was asleep or was trying to go to sleep last night around 4 a.m., 4 a.m., yeah. So I only had 2 to 3 hours, less than that, to rest. My mind knew that I had done programming for 48 straight hours almost, besides like 8 hours of sleep. So 40 hours of programming in just music, nonstop programming for 48 hours. I'm not trying to say that this is the atheist way to awaken the pineal gland or the mind's eye. But what I'm trying to say is I accidentally awakened my mind's eye as somebody who is secular. And that's an experience. Is it an important experience? And I wonder why we have it. It's a question I've been asking. Why do we have the mind's eye? Like, why do we even have a built in function that generates visions and ideas, um, connects with like a source that speeds up your conscious brain briefly and takes all the history that you ever knew and everything you ever learned and all the stuff, including the bullshit, combines it into a vision to answer a question. A question that you didn't have an answer for. I'm not saying that I got a correct answer. I'm saying that the answer gave me clarity. And so there is a use for this. I don't want to call it technology like some people use in the aliens people use. This, I guess I can call it evolutionary technology because that's the only word I can think of for it. This item, the mind's eye, I believe we evolved to have it so we could run away from our programming. So we could gain clarity, defeat cognitive dissonance, and run away from what we were taught. Most of the things that we learn were taught. And not all the things that we learn, all the programming we learn is bad, but this is a clarity that, if used correctly, it will give you relief that you did not know that you had in your subconscious mind. So, for instance, I no longer believe in the Bible. Like, I don't have a feeling of faith, the soul, sense, Holy Spirit with the Bible. I don't. And I choose to say that carefully. I say that with the least amount of disrespect as possible. And the reason why I'm being respectful is because I understand all human beings have the capacity to love. All human beings have the capacity to learn. All human beings have the capacity to deprogram. All human beings have the capacity to grow. And I don't want to say you need the soul in order to be moral or good or nice. The biologist that I watched a few weeks ago clarified the human condition, and after listening to him over and over for about 3 or 4 hours, because I do like to listen to the same thing over and over until I understand a lot of the aspects, determined that human beings were not just mechanical machines that only serve their self. He determined that the children of some animals, the kids, I guess that would be the more correct term, um, the offspring, will love their mothers unconditionally and believe that their mothers love them unconditionally, even if the mother is under the influence of self serving behavior. And that extends further into humanity, where I'm not saying it's reasonable to love everybody unconditionally, but it will extend to a point in humanity where we can love each other without being self serving. And the whole shebang. So there is good philosophy, in my opinion, and there is constructed bad philosophy, or philosophy used in a weaponized way, where somebody goes up to somebody, approaches them, and they're like, well, this is what I believe, and I don't have any evidence. Okay, that happens all the time. And the person who's acting as a philosopher in the debate will say, prove it. Now, this might sound unreasonable, but the way I have done it is, instead of saying prove it, I listen to what they have to say. I break it down all the way and look for whatever evidence they claim. And then I take it one step further, take the item that they're talking about and research everything about it, including in history. And then I come back to them and tell them my thoughts. I have not found evidence for the thing you're talking about. Or I have found evidence, but it's not relevant to the point you're trying to make, or the belief that you want me to share with you. That is how I've been doing it since I was 17. I have been testing people since I was 17, and it has been a battle for me instead of a discourse, where I would join groups to disable them, where I would change people's minds. When I was really young, super young, I weaponized ideas and made people feel uncomfortable about the situation they were in. This was over 10 years ago, I made people feel like the world was going to end. And Sure enough, it just synchronicity. It happened 4 blood moons, etc. Then we had battles in politics, and then the whole world, in the blink of a fucking eye, became political. And then those people were like, "Hey, man, you were right," years later. And I'm like, "No, I was not right. I was wrong. It was based on assumptions. Just so happened that the world is in constant chaos to the point where since the Black Plague, basically, and before then, but since the Black Plague, you could basically be correct every time you said Revelations is happening. Almost. Because the world is chaotic. Because the world is in dismay. Because there are people who hold power who are sworn to secrecy. And then there are people who don't have power. And then when you reject them, like we did with the Republic, some of the people in the Republic are still sworn to secrecy, and then it gets invaded by another group. That is a brief history that I can prove. And that is a small, tiny bit of history of the problem. The problem isn't the people that are sworn to secrecy or their control in government. The problem is people not knowing how to identify with their self. People not knowing how to identify with their mind's eye, with the thoughts that they've created, and with deprogramming. The tools of philosophy is deprogramming. It is not attacking. It is not war. It is not book burning. Programming's always going to happen. There's always going to be somebody who wants to put an idea out there that sounds convincing. They'll use evidence here and there to support the idea. But the evidence, it's not surmounting enough for a reasonable belief in it. And that will go around the world. Now, could the idea be good for humanity? Sure, as Hume said. And could the idea be bad for humanity? Sure. Sure. But humanity needs to learn individual by individual, because you can't mass program deprogramming. That doesn't work. Individual by individual, and how, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. There's got to be different methods for each person on how they want to deprogram themselves. And that will solve all our problems. That will solve all our problems, because then people won't just believe what they're told. And so there is a convoluted thing I want to say, and it's true. So in the New Testament, not the New Testament's not true, but what I'm about to say about the New Testament is true. There's a position that Christ holds in the Bible that doesn't sound nice at all to being an adult. The position is that unless you humble yourself like a child and you're like a child and whatever, you can't get into heaven. I feel like this is manipulated. Like, it's saying unless you're ignorant, it's not saying that, but it feels like it's pointing to unless you're ignorant, unless you just believe everything I say, then you cannot get into heaven. That's exactly what Christ is saying. Unless you believe everything that I tell you, you cannot get into heaven. That's what Christ says, and that's what Christians say. Okay, but it's counterintuitive to the prophecy he supposedly gives later, which basically says hell is for everybody on what he said in John 17. There's other documentation you want to read there. If you want to look at Christ as something other than a deity, if you want to look at Christ as a genuine person who's trying to speak his mind, there's something in John 17 that makes him look like a real just person. And the way that he speaks in John 17, he makes it sound like he's an alien, and I don't believe in aliens. Like Solid did. What do I say? For sure, I don't have enough evidence to believe that Christ is an alien. But what I'm saying is that if you were to look at Christ as a regular person, the way that he talks, it sounds like he's an alien. Like he talks like, well, we're not of the world. Like these are the things he says in Streamline. It's the same way Krishna talks in the Hindus. Now, if you understand religions, a lot of religions do a mixed worldview of space and deities. And that is the mixed worldview in John 17, where Christ is telling the world to be not of the world. We're spirits in space. Be not of the world. That's kind of what Christ is saying, which is counterintuitive what he said before. So you understand that a few things happen. One, Christ might have never been a person. Two, Christ might have been a person, but people manipulated the Bible, which is believable. Or three, the documents were written decades after Christ, and in writing the first written letters of the Bible were manipulated by the writers, who, this is a problem for scholars, and they know this problem. It is the problem that there's a lot of famous people back then, and the writers of the Bible and other letters, the 2,000 letters that, the Catholic Church burned to history. So there's your Bible broken up into pieces and selectively destroyed by the fucking elite, which has always been a historical thing. The writers would pretend to be famous people when they were writing things to make their ideas legitimate. That's a problem in scholarly history. So, and then we go to Revelations, the latest book in the Bible, which is talking about the people who basically ripped it to shreds. The people who ripped the Bible to shreds, the Catholic Church. Because Revelations mentions if you connect all the dots, and scholars have done this and historians have done this, that Revelations is a warning about the people in charge of the Catholic Church. And the people who were in charge of the Catholic Church behaved similar